friends, welcome back to my channel and Happy New Year. Thank you for being here with me in 2022. I had a wonderful year last year. I really appreciate all of you who stopped by and exchange bookish connections with me, and it's just awesome to know that you're here with me as well in 2022. Last year was great. There were a lot of highs. There were some not quite lows, but there were some things that didn't go quite according to plan, and that's fine. Sometimes those are learning opportunities, and we're going to use them to springboard to move forward. So we're not going to dwell too far in the past. So we're looking back slightly to look forward. Today's video is acknowledging the Run Right Reads Book Club, saying thank you to all the people who have participated, people who have watched the videos, announcement videos, review videos, people who interact with me on Instagram with the Run Right Reads Book Club. Today is an acknowledgement of all of you and a celebration and an invitation to come forward with me, come forward with us in the Run Right Reads Book Club in 2022. So briefly, we are going to mention the books that we read last year and talk about the books that we're planning to read, at least for the first half of 2022. So last year, the book club's focus was on reading the Caribbean. And we chose a different Caribbean country each month, and we read 2 different novels by 2 different authors each month, and use that as a place to kind of compare how the different authors write about the country and what we're learning about the politics and about the people through reading these novels. That was the intention. It didn't always go according to plan. Some of the book club members didn't always read both books. I tried to read both books every month. There were a couple of months where I didn't completely succeed. More on that later. But I think it's a great idea, even if the execution isn't always the best. I can't continue with this video until I mention the people who have been with Run Right Reads Book Club from month 1 all through 2021. People like Sherry from Diverse PhD Reads and Laura Brahman. She doesn't have a YouTube channel, but she's active here and she's active on Instagram. I'll link these people's profiles where I can. I'll link them down below so you can go check them out. Sherry, Laura, Lisa from Literary Latina X, Alba from Seriala. She wasn't always there, but she came on every now and then, and we're always happy when Alba comes on. There was Candice from CC Reads. I can't remember her Instagram profile, but again, I'll link them down below. And there is Sharon Washington. There were a few other people who popped in and off, like Dawn from Beige Book Club, and I'll link them down below so you can go check them out. So we are looking forward to opening up the book club to anyone who wants to participate. It is a free book club. All you have to do is read the books and come online to discuss them with us. And I try to post, or at least in the beginning of the year, I was posting review videos a little bit more consistently so we could kind of keep up with a discussion here on YouTube as well. I'm going to try to continue that in 2022. That's going to be a little bit more of a focus. So looking back at the books that we read last year, in January, we started reading Guadalupe, and so we read Bridge of Beyond by Simone Schwartz-Bart and The Wondrous and Tragic Life of Ivan and Ivana. Both of these books I really loved. I think if I had to choose one over the other as a recommendation, I'd probably go for this one because this one has an element that is going to be upsetting to some people. I love that this one is focusing on women who are living with the legacy of slavery, able to exert their power to choose the life that they want to live. And so I love this book. If I had to choose one out of both, then this would be my first choice. In January, we went to Jamaica and we read Here Comes the Sun by Nicole Dennis Benn and These Ghosts Are Family by Maisie Card. Both of these are excellent. I think if you had to pick both, but I'd say this one. I think Here Comes the Sun is probably a little bit more well received as a novel, just because this one has a lot more characters. It spans a little bit more of, and we don't get to spend as much time with the characters. In this one, we focus on a mother and her 2 daughters living in Jamaica and the life that they have away from maybe what you would experience as a tourist to the country, even though the sister, who is the breadwinner of the family, and the mother both work to entertain tourists in some way. So very interesting books. I'd pick this one over this one just for the reason that more people seem to like this one, but I love them both. In March, we read books from Puerto Rico. We read The House on the Lagoon by Rosario Fairey and The Taste of Sugar by Maricel Vera. And I loved both of these books, but I think if I had to pick one, I would pick The House on the Lagoon, just because I felt like the story here was just so rich. The author used some really interesting writing elements to reach and connect with the reader, where we had a woman who was writing her family or her husband's family story, and her fictional husband reaching into her manuscript in the novel and interrupting. And I thought that that was a really effective way to show how someone may want to tell a story, but other people may disagree with it. And so I liked both of these books. I probably loved both of these books, but if I had to pick one as a recommendation, it would be this one, even though this one isn't far behind. In April, we read Trinidad and Tobago. This was a favorite from my teenage years, The Wine of Astonishment by Earl Loveless. And this is another favorite that I had read a few years ago when it was first released, Golden Child by Claire Adam. So I love both of these books. I think more people prefer Wine of Astonishment. If I had to recommend one, it would probably still be this, because it's an old favorite, and I think the author is very realistic in his portrayal of the difficulties of someone trying to move out of or to move between classes in this mid 1900s era. It talks about some of the difficulties of the experience of colonialism by Black people and the influence of Britain on religious expression. And I think it does it so beautifully that it's hard not to say that this is just an overwhelmingly solid read. So anything else I read is going to fall short in comparison. But like I said, I love both of these books. In May, we read Haiti, and we read God Loves Haiti by Dimitri Elias Leger and The Dew Breaker by Edwidge Danticat, and I really enjoyed both of these books. This one focuses on the Haitian earthquake in the early 2000s. I forget the exact year. This one focuses a little bit on the political corruption. The Dew Breaker focuses in part on some of the political connections and the corruption that is associated with that. We are focusing on one main character, one man who was politically connected and who committed some horrible crimes against fellow citizens, and we're following some of the people's lives who were impacted by what he did. And so this was really stirring. So if I had to choose one of these as a recommendation, it would probably be this, just because I think Edwidge Danticat's writing is just so immersive. But either of these, I think you would come away with an experience of Haiti that I would recommend that you check out. In June, we read Barbados, and we read How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House by Sherry Jones, and In the Castle of My Skin by George Lamming. This is more of a new release. This is definitely a backlist title, and I was happy that I read both of them for different reasons. This one focuses a little bit on the life of people a generation ago and how people were being groomed to become responsible citizens, but not just citizens of their country, how they were being raised to be citizens of the British colonies, kind of. This one focuses a little bit more on the contemporary experience of Barbados. We're following a couple who are involved in the tourism industry, but they're definitely struggling financially, and we're reading about some of the things that they do to take themselves out of dire financial straits, some of the sacrifices that they make. And it does a little bit of a deep dive into the sacrifices that people make and why they make them. And this is a 5-star read, so I can't say that I would recommend one over the other. I just think that this is a little bit more reachable. This is definitely a story that has some very tough themes, but I think either of these that you read, you will definitely come away with an experience of Barbados, just that this one is in the previous time and this one is more modern day. In July, we read 2 books from the Dominican Republic. We read The Brief Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde by Juna Diaz, which is not my favorite, but I know that it has very high critical acclaim. It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's not a personal favorite of mine. But, read it because other people love it. We also read In the Time of Butterflies by Julia Alvarez, which focuses on the lives of people who were being impacted by Trujillo's dictatorship. And this one also has very high critical acclaim. If I have to choose one over the other, then I'm definitely going to choose this over Oscar Wilde. In August, we read Grenada. We read Force Right by Cindy McKenzie and Operation Desert Rat by Kamua McBarnett. This one was following a personal story. The author wrote about a young girl growing up, coming of age in Grenada. And part of her coming of age story is experiencing the coup where the president and his administration were taken over. The president was killed. And some of the other political things that happen and how it's experienced by a small child. We read Operation Desert Rat because this one focused a little bit more on the political experience. It's hard to recommend this book because I think the writing maybe suffered a little bit because the author was one of the people involved in the political coup and is writing from prison, almost writing about his experience in prison, but giving the story an allegory and using animals to represent people. Interesting, but not quite as interesting as this one, but both of them are so different that it's hard to say which I'd choose. But if I had to choose one as a recommendation, it's definitely going to be Force Right by Cindy McKenzie. In September, we read St. Lucia by Derek Walcott, who's a Nobel Prize winner, and we read Nor Any Country by Garth St. Omer. This is Homer's tale set in the Caribbean, and this one is about a man who has left home for some time and is now returning to deal with his unfinished business, but not really because he doesn't necessarily want to own up to what he needs to do. Very interesting, both of them. But this one is a little lacking maybe because it is so short. So if I had to recommend one, it's going to be Mr. Walcott. Even though this is not quite as readable because it is also poetry. So I'm not sure that this is definitely my strongest recommendation of this list. But of course, if I had to pick one out of the two, then it would still be this one. October, we read the United States Virgin Islands. We read The Lesson by Cadwell Turnbull and Land of Love and Drowning by Tiffany Yannick. Land of Love and Drowning was wonderful. It was a story about a family, and the author gives this family and different members of this family different characteristics that connect the people to the country and the experience of the country and how the country is tied to the United States and how its lot is tied to the United States. She gives that as characteristics of the female characters in the novel. And I thought that was such an interesting dynamic and how she chose to personalize it. She also wrote about some topics that may be a little bit challenging for some people to read about because there was some incestuous relationships. The Lesson by Cadwell Turnbull was a little bit of a science fiction experience, but set so that it felt like it's something that could really happen right now. And so we're reading about an alien invasion and how the country, how the people, and how the government, how they've become assimilated with the idea that they're aliens living amongst them and the immunity that they give these aliens because of the exchange of commodities and, you know, what they end up sacrificing in order to get access to what they think the aliens provide. I thought that that was a really well told story as well. So if I had to choose one of the books from United States Virgin Islands, I'm not sure how to choose. I think I'd still recommend Land of Love and Drowning. But either one of these that you read, I think you may enjoy them, you know, depending on your taste. In November, we read two books from Antigua. We read Musical Youth by Joanne C. Hillhouse and Annie John by Jamaica Kincaid. Jamaica Kincaid is one of my favorite authors, one of my favorite Caribbean authors. And so I love her books. She's writing about a young girl and how she sees herself through her mother's eyes. And as she's growing up and realizing that she and her mother have to become separate, how she tries to distance herself. But it's almost like she can only exist in love or hate. There's nothing in between. And so she moves from one extreme to the other as she tries to establish a separate identity. And, you know, kind of seeing generational connections and generational curses being passed through this family was a really wonderful read. Love this one, but I also really love Joanne Hillhouse's YA novel, Musical Youth, which focuses on the experience of children learning about colorism and how colorism is manifested in their communities. And one of the things that we all loved talking about in the book club was how this author chose to show male friendship, and it was just wonderful. It was a wonderful read because of so many things. So I think if I had to recommend one of the books, even though I really love Annie John, I think I would probably more push you towards Joanne Hillhouse's Musical Youth, just because, you know, this is not such a well-known author, and maybe she could stand to use a little bit more recognition. But definitely, reading a Jamaica Kincaid novel is never a bad idea. And in December, we read Cuba. We read The Mortifications by Derek Palacio and Havana Red by Leonardo Padura. And I'm not going to talk about them intentionally because I have a review filmed for tomorrow. And I want to leave you in suspense a little bit because I want you to come back. You'll have to come back for another video to hear my thoughts on those two books. But before you go, I'm going to announce the books that we're going to be reading in the RunwrightReads Book Club in the first half of 2022. So I want to stick around for the announcement. So in 2022, the RunwrightReads Book Club from the Caribbean. Last year, we read 2 books every month. This year, we're not reading 2 books every month, but some months we will. So some of the books that we read in 2021 are books that are easily accessible. I tried to choose books that everyone would be able to find, especially to find used copies or to be able to find e-copies from a library and so on. But however, as you go down the list, you start to recognize that there aren't that many authors who their books are widely available for purchase outside of the Caribbean in a lot of ways. So it gets a little bit more difficult to find books that everybody can access in time for a book club. So some of these choices are strategic. So in January, we're reading 1 book, and we're reading The Long Song by Andrea Levy. Andrea Levy was shortlisted for the book. Her novels are probably more widely available. You can order them in the United States. You can order them from the United Kingdom. What I'm saying is it's probably easier to get her books. So Andrea Levy's book, The Long Song, is the book that we're reading for January. In February, we're also reading 1 book only. We're reading Love, Anger, Madness by Maria Vuchave, and she is from Haiti. Her book, I got a copy last year from Book Outlet, so I know her book is probably available easily. In March, we're reading 2 books. One of them is a book that may be a little bit difficult to source, but the other book is probably more easily available. So 2 books, and if you read one or the other, you're fine. So in March, we're reading Trinidad, The Mermaid of Black Conch by Monique Roffey, and The Lonely Londoners by Samuel Salvon. Monique Roffey is a contemporary author. The Mermaid of Black Conch won the Costo Award last year, so I'm sure her book is widely available. The Lonely Londoners is more of a classic, and it may be difficult to purchase depending on where you are. So if you want to read one or the other, that's fine. In April, we're reading 2 books, again, because both of these books I think are a little shorter. And so we are reading Brown Girl in the Ring by Nalo Hopkinson and The Pain Tree by Olive Sr. Both of these are women who are of Jamaican heritage, but they live in Canada. Chosen for that reason. In May, we're going to be reading from St. Kitts Nevis, and we're going to be reading 2 authors, 2 men from St. Kitts. One is Carol Phillips, Crossing the River. We're also going to be reading Only God Can Make a Tree by Bertram Roach, who was born in St. Kitts, lived abroad briefly, but returned to St. Kitts for most of his adult life, and has published a novel in his later years the articles that I've read about him said that he's a senior citizen and was a senior citizen when he published his first novel. So that's interesting. At least it is to me. in June, we're reading Barbados. And so we have Praise Song for the Widow by Paul Marshall and Josephine Against the Sea by Shakira Bourne. Shakira Bourne's novel is a new release. I think it's a middle grade novel published last year. And Paul Marshall's novel is more of a classic. So I'm not sure which one is more accessible to readers, but we have those two as options. If you want to read one or the other, that's fine. And in July, one novel in July, and that is Maurice Conde's I, Tituba, Black Witch of Salem, because I really want to read more Maurice Conde, and I hope you do too. So those are the books for the Run Right Reads Book Club for the first 7 months of 2022. That's as far ahead as I could plan the book club for, giving us time and opportunity to see how our reading is going and to plan accordingly for how we want to read for the rest of the year. So that's the Run Right Reads Book Club, a little 2021 recap and a little projection for 2022. I hope you will join me as we continue to read the Caribbean together and to learn more about our world through novels. So thank you so much for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. We'll be back tomorrow with another video. And until then, happy reading.